Welcome back to our class. I'm Neil Fogarty, and we're going to be talking about the course here of Management 453, Creativity and Innovation. We've been going over the 6 I's model. And today we're going to be getting into Chapter 5. We're going to be taking a look at the I for investigate, the I for investigate. And as usual, the author has done with this chapter what she's done with the others. She's divided it up into basically 4 topics, 4 parts. We'll start off with an introduction. Then we'll go to the profile of an investigator, looking at the strengths of an investigator, the weaknesses or challenges of an investigator, and how do we communicate and how do we manage an investigator? What do we say and not say? What do we do and not do? She then moves into the skills of an investigator, and then she'll finish up with the mindset of an investigator. So let's take a look at this topic of investigate. Let's start off with the introduction, and she has what she says is a rule, and it's pretty important. She basically says we need to know how an idea can go to market. We need to know how an idea can go to the market. So we have to test our idea thoroughly, and we have to test our thinking, through and through. And one of her key points, pretty good one, is we have to avoid jumping feet first into implementation. We have to avoid jumping feet first into implementation. So what we have to do is we have to investigate. Let's investigate the market. Let's find out some more things. We'll investigate other things too with regard to our ideas, etc. But in this particular case, let's make sure that we investigate the market. Think about this when you did the Snowflake Lab, from the Happy Valley Launch Box. Think about this. How many of your teams in the first round, maybe second, sat down, immediately start cutting up snowflakes and making some of the greatest snowflakes you ever did see, very creative and very innovative snowflakes, and then when you took them up to the buyers, nobody was interested. Well, that's what we're talking about here. That's kind of the problem. You didn't investigate first. You didn't see what did the market want, what's market demand. You should investigate. Now think about once you started to learn that, once you started to find out what your buyers wanted, they want big or small and what that meant and all those other things. I want color, I don't, and I want it for this purpose and I want it for that purpose or whatever. That probably helped your team to figure out how to produce things, what to produce things, how to sell things, etc. And it probably made your team a lot more productive. So under this introduction, she's basically starting off with a pretty good rule. And that's the rule, hey, we have to investigate. Let's check things out. Let's do some thinking before we do some acting. Let's not jump feet first into implementation. Let's first think a little bit about it. Let's go to the second topic then, the profile. And we're talking about investigate, so we're going to look at the profile of an investigator. So under the profile, as usual, she divides it into 3 sections. In the first section, she takes a look at some of the strengths of an investigator. What's a good investigator going to do? What are some of the strengths of a good investigator? And think about it. On your team, you probably needed to have, people who are investigators, who are good at going up and asking, what's going on, etc. What do you want? And, investigating the market and finding out what's needed. So let's take a look at some of the strengths that she mentioned. She has 6. She starts off and she says, one of the strengths of a good investigator is he or she's going to systematically research, analyze, and assess ideas. Research, analyze, and assess ideas. This idea you have, this wonderful snowflake, does it fit at all, what the market's demanding, what our buyers want? The second strength, a good investigator will make sure that his or her, their ideas, or our team's ideas are useful and not just novel. Useful, not just novel. I mean, again, think about it. You came up with some really neat looking snowflakes. I walked around, I saw various tables and teams cutting up things. And there were some really novel ideas, some unique ideas, some really neat ideas. But they weren't useful because the buyers didn't want them. The buyers had no use for them. So let's go to the next strength of an investigator. A good investigator will understand the importance of testing and validating ideas. Testing and validating ideas. Some of you on your teams, and I saw this happen, what you would do is before you'd start cutting up a whole bunch of snowflakes, usually this is probably the second or third round, you'd take up a test with Snowflake, a prototype, so to speak. And you'd ask the buyer, is this what you want? Bigger, smaller, what do you need, etc., like that. So what you were doing is you were testing and you were validating the ideas you had. That was a good thing. Let's go to the fourth strength of an investigator. Fourth strength that's related to the third. A good investigator is going to be willing to test, their ideas with customers and stakeholders. Okay, go up, ask them, is this what you want? Let's ask them, etc. In fact, a little bit later on, we'll talk about ways to find out what do your customers want. We'll talk about that in a couple moments. Let's go to the fifth strength. The fifth strength of an investigator goes to a different perspective of strengths of all these different eyes, diverse people that we have, investigators, investors, and all these other people that we have. And it's a pretty good one. A good investigator will create a culture where exploration and questioning are encouraged, especially regarding the market and customers. A good investigator will create a culture where exploration and questioning are encouraged, especially regarding the market and customers. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to, on a team, you might be an investigator, but you want to try to encourage others to investigate. Create this culture. Hey, let's go up and ask questions. In fact, again, I go back to the Snowflake Lab. One of the things that I saw quite a lot of your teams do is the first round, you might have sent up one person, but the second round I started seeing two, maybe three, and the fourth round I started seeing almost the entire team going up, etc., because a culture had been created. Let's question, let's explore, let's get up there, let's get some information. And the sixth and the final strength that's mentioned here, and is related to that as well, is a good investigator will encourage other people on the team to think things through. Let's not jump and start cutting snowflakes. Let's start thinking, what did they say? Oh, the investigator wanted what and why, etc. So you want to start to think things through, and you want to encourage other people on the team to do the same. So those are the strengths under the profile of strengths of a good investigator. Let's now go to the second major topic under a profile, and that's the weaknesses or challenges. You want to have an investigator on your team, that's a given. So what could be wrong with that? What type of challenges might you have if you have a good investigator on your team? What type of weaknesses do some investigators have? Your textbook lists four of them here. The first is actually related to a slide that I'm going to show to you. In fact, let me go to that slide right now, and then I'll talk about that as well as the first of these challenges or weaknesses that we tend to see that investigators have. So let's take a look at the slide. So let's take a look at this weakness, and then I want to talk about this slide. She says one of the first weaknesses investigators have is some continually seek validation and they stall. They never have enough information. Now, indeed, we want to get information. That's part of investigate. But where do we draw the line? If we're never satisfied with the information we have, will we ever get anything done? Will we ever have a time in life where we have all the information we need, or are we just going to have to go through life and on occasion, maybe more often than occasion, make some guesses based on the information we have? We don't have everything. Based on what we have, I think the answer is this or that. In the slide that I have here, it mentions blog. An example of this, and an investigator like this, is a good friend of mine, an attorney friend of mine, who has a fairly successful practice, and is also actually the godfather of my youngest son. In addition to his law practice, and again, he was making some pretty good money, he decided to want to make some extra money. Who doesn't, right? And one of the thoughts he had is, let's create a blog. And he did some research on blogging, thought this was an opportunity for him. So he had this idea, and I forget what it was he was going to blog on. I don't know, chocolate chip cookie recipes or something. But there was some blog that he was coming up with. But as a good attorney, he wanted to make sure the I's are dotted and T's are crossed before he jumped into the water. Again, you don't want to jump, before you think, etc. You want to see how deep the water is, how cold it is, and things like that. So he starts to do an investigation. He starts to do some research on blogging. Sounds good. That was well over 6 years ago, and he's still researching. He has never found enough information, because as soon as he finds some, it leads to others and others and others. I mean, for example, go and Google anything nowadays. You're going to get, a million results for anything. And, that's even something really specific. You have something general, oh my goodness, you're going to have, a couple of million. So he wants to go through and he wants to look literally at everything. Well, that's great. He's investigating. But he's never produced. He's never made the blog. And it's a blog, for goodness sake. We're not talking brain surgery here. And, he could have done this by now, but he hasn't. So one of the challenges is continually seeking validation and stalling because you never have enough information. Let's take a look at the second challenge, or second weakness, and that's getting lost in the detail and losing sight of the big picture and of your purpose. Keep in mind, go back to the 6 Eyes model. The way that the lady who wrote the book and came up with the model has the model put together, right in the center of the 6 eyes, she has the word purpose. And it ties all 6 eyes together. You got little lines and arrows and triangles and stuff like that connecting these two. And that's because she said that purpose is so important. It's like the cog on a wheel. It's the center of the wheel. It's where the axle goes through, etc. This is so important. Sometimes investigators just lose sight of that big picture, lose sight of the purpose. Why am I investigating? Oh, I found out this detail and that detail, etc. And they're not related at all to the purpose. And then goes off on a tangent, starts doing research on all those things. I mean, I would imagine this has happened to you. I know it happened to me. In fact, it happened to me the other night. I was watching some YouTube videos on a topic of interest to me. And all of a sudden, one of the YouTube videos led me to another video. It had nothing at all really to do with it. It was kind of tangential. And I watched that, and it led to another. Next thing you know, I spent, I don't know, probably half an hour or 45 minutes watching all these little videos or whatever. And by the time I got done, it occurred to me I was way off track. I had to go back and go to the original video. What was I doing this for? So again, don't lose sight of the big picture. Don't lose sight of your purpose. That's certainly a weakness that some investigators had, and certainly one that I had last night when I was looking at YouTube. Let's go to the next challenge that she mentions. And this one goes a lot to personality and style. Some investigators dismiss the ideas of others, and they're too quick to judge. They dismiss the ideas of others, and they're too quick to judge. You're talking with someone, for example, at the snowflake thing. You go up there, and the buyer, potential buyers, giving you some information, and you just dismiss it. Oh yeah, okay, I hear you, but I know what you really want. You don't know what you want. I know what you want. So you kind of dismiss that idea, and you're also kind of quick to judge. Or you go back and you start to tell this to your teammates or whatever. Oh, the buyer said this, that, and the other. And one or two of your teammates has a question. Well, what about this? Does the buyer mean this, or does she mean this, etc.? And you just dismissed it. No. So again, another problem that you can have is if you're investigating, you want to have an open mind. You don't want to be dismissive, and you don't want to judge things too quickly, particularly judge things poorly, but even judge favorably. Oh, they're going to love it. Probably not. But if you make that judgment, well, okay, others might indeed jump in the same boat as you, and the next thing you know, you kind of jumped before thinking, etc. You made that leap before thinking. Well, let's go to the fourth and final challenge that she mentions here with regard to investigators, and that is an investigator might be blinded by their love of an idea. They might be blinded by their love of an idea. Oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever done. Oh my gosh, this is great, etc. And they are so thrilled with it. They don't investigate much. And I find out, and had they might have found out, I was in love with it, but my market isn't in love with it. I was in love with it, but it's not practical, it's not feasible, nobody wants it, no one's going to pay for it, etc. So another thing is you can find investigators, as they're investigating, they find a fact or something like that that is so thrilling to them, it blinds them to the rest of the facts. And they focus on one, not the others, and what happens back there when you're making your snowflake? Probably not going to make the right snowflake. So that finishes up the second part of this investigator profile. We just looked at the weaknesses, the challenges of having a good investigator. So let's go to the third and the final point under this profile, and that's how do you manage and how do you communicate with investigators. And again, she puts these into two sections, and it's great. She puts in a section of do's, things you should do or should say. She puts into a section of don'ts, things you shouldn't do and shouldn't say. So let's start off. Let's start off with the do's. Some things that she thinks that you as the manager, as the leader of these investigators, of your team, some things that you should do. You should talk about details and be thorough. When your investigator comes back and says, oh, you know what, the information I found is that buyer up there, that buyer wants a snowflake that's big. You as a leader should say, well, what's big mean? Are there any other details? We've got to be a little bit more thorough on this. So, before we start cutting a whole bunch of big snowflakes. I think it was one of the teams, someone came back and said they wanted big. So they took their snowflake and they cut, you only had a couple sheets of paper, right? They took an entire sheet of paper and they made one snowflake out of it. And they colored it and all this other stuff they thought, etc., took it up. That's not what the person wanted. So now we've got a problem. You only had a couple sheets of paper. They just wasted an entire sheet of paper with regard to this because no one is asking about the details. No one's being thorough. So one of the things you want to do as a manager and a leader is you want to be thorough. You want to ask for those details. Another thing you should do as you manage and communicate with them is you want to encourage them to test their ideas with customers and those who are involved in the process, the manufacturing process, etc. that you have. Again, hey, listen, I think what you're saying is buyer 3 up there wants this and that, etc. Before we start making a whole bunch of this, that, etc., why don't we make a test one, a little prototype, and then why don't you take it up and say, this is a model, we can make it bigger or whatever. This is what you're talking about? So one of the things you want to do as the leader is you want to encourage them to test their ideas with their customers and other people that are involved in the process. Let's take a look at the third do. There's only 4, so let's take a look at the third do. You want to make sure that both you and the investigator present ideas systematically. They're not all over the board, etc., not overwhelming, etc. Present them systematically. And you also, as the leader, you want to invite critical thinking. Well, what do you think? Do you think this is good? Do you think we should change this? What do you think about that? I thought that, when they said big, they meant this. What do you think about that? So as the leader, you want to invite critical thinking. Even ask with regard to your investigator, do you really think this is what they want? Are you sure, etc.? Invite them to do a little bit more thinking on it. Be critical with regard to thinking. Ask for more parts, more descriptions. And the fourth and the final do under how to communicate and manage them is make space for your investigators to research and explore. Make space for them. Give them time to research and explore. Again, think about this. When you started that snowflake lab, people are starting right off. Let's cut. Well, why? We don't have time. My goodness, look, the team next to us, they have 3 of them. Then over there, they got 4 or 5 of them made. We got to run. Odds are your investigator's going to need some time to go up and stand in line, ask some questions, come back, talk to you, go back, stand in line, ask some more questions, etc. Give them space to do their research. Give them space. Give them time to explore. So those were the do's. What are some of the don'ts? What don't we want to do as we manage them? Or what don't we want to say as we manage our investigators? Well, once again, she has 4 of them. The first of these, as the leader, you don't want to be haphazard. You don't want to lack rigor, and you don't want to lack logic. As the leader, think about it. You don't want to be all over the place, right? You want to be enthusiastic, etc., and you want to be logical. So those are some pretty good things insofar as do's with regard to how you got to lead your team and lead these investigators. Another thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to jump into ideas before seeing if the idea actually meets a customer or market need. You don't want to jump into ideas before seeing that the idea meets a customer or market need. Well, again, go back to your first round or 2 of the snowflake. It wasn't until you got into the latter rounds and you really figured out what they wanted that oh my goodness, we're now selling things, we can make more, etc. Let's go up and sell some more, etc. So don't jump into ideas before seeing if indeed they meet a customer or market need. I remember at least a couple of teams in Snowflake, hearing some of the people, including the team leader, saying, "That buyer's crazy. This is the best Snowflake in the world. They're nuts." Well, maybe the buyer is crazy, but the buyer's the one who's buying. So again, don't jump into ideas. What you want to do, because you might have some great ideas. Oh, it's a great Snowflake, but your buyer doesn't want it. Your buyer's not the crazy one. You are, because you're not selling to yourself. You're selling to your buyer. So again, don't jump into ideas before seeing if the idea meets a customer market need. Let's go to the third of the 4 don'ts that we have here. Don't be overly attached to an idea. This concept, oh, everybody's going to love it. Oh my goodness, this is great. Sadly, in life, oftentimes you don't find everybody loves it. And think about this. How many times in life have, just in your day-to-day affairs, you come up with some idea. Oh, I know what we're going to do this weekend. Let's go out and let's do this. Or I know what we're going to eat this weekend, etc. Or make eat tonight. This is what we're going to. And you go and you're all thinking, enthusiastic. You looked at this, that, and the other, and it just makes so much sense to you. And you go and you tell everybody, tonight we're going to have pizza. And they all look at you like you're crazy. You had pizza last night, and I'm tired of pizza. And they closed, and it cost too much, and I really want, etc. So, don't become overly attached to an idea thinking everybody will love it. Usually doesn't happen. And then the fourth and the final don't crowd the thinking of your investigators with too many ideas. Don't crowd their thinking. I saw one team where the investigator, they only had one investigator. This is one of the early rounds. They only had one investigator. And it was a he. And he came back to the table. And the team, under the leadership, if you would, of the team leader, was saying, ask this, da, 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 da. And the next thing you know, holy cow, the person couldn't remember. Think about it. You can only remember so much, right? And I'm already thinking about this. Now you want me to ask about that and this and the other, etc. like that. Don't crowd their thinking with too many ideas. Get what you can, and then go and find out more. Get what you can, find out more. Yes, we want to move fast, but I'd rather move fast after I know what I'm doing, after I know what the market wants, than move fast before I'm making a guess, because oftentimes the guesses are not right, like many of your early snowflakes that you had. Well, that finishes up the don'ts. That finishes up the profile. So let's move on to the third of the 4 major topics for today. The skills that are needed, the investigate skills, or the skills for an investigator. And again, as I've mentioned in some of my earlier lectures, you also want to look in your textbook under tools and activities, because there's going to be some stuff there that it's going to be quite interesting, quite helpful, quite useful, and certainly can fall into the next quiz that we have. Well, let's take a look at some of the skills. Sheila 6. We've covered many of them. Some we haven't. Let's take a look. The first skill of an investigator is to be analytical and structured. Analytical and structured. What do you mean by big? And let me ask you this next question. Do you mean this, etc.? And you want to be structured in the way that you ask questions. You want to be analytical, etc. And as you carry the information back the same way. You also, another skill, you want to be able to work things through carefully and methodically. Don't jump to conclusions. Be careful, methodical. Yes, it's going to take some time. Everybody else is running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And yes, you might be falling behind them, but maybe they're making good snowflakes. So what you want to do is just take some time. It might raise your stress level up. It might raise the stress level of your team up. But again, you want to work things through carefully and methodically. Another skill of a good investigator is you want to involve customers and others who might benefit from whatever product you have, etc. Again, go up and ask them. Involve them. Hey, this is what we're going to do. What do you think about this? And what about that? Can I change this? Can I change the fact? Would you design this? What do you think about that? Could you show me a picture of that? Could you draw this for me, etc.? So you're going to involve customers. The fourth skill out of the 6 that she has is you want to make sure that there's a real need out there that your idea could meet. Is there a real need? It's nice to know what your customer wants, but you know what? I think in addition to that, I think you learned in Snowflake, You also want to find out the why. Okay, I know I asked you what do you want. I now have an idea. But it's probably not a bad idea to ask why. Why do you want this? What's the purpose of this, etc. If you know why, that might fill in a lot of gaps. It might take something that looks vague to you, and all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense now because I know why. For example, one of the buyers in some of the snowflake exercises that I've run wanted a snowflake made because the buyer had punched a hole in a wall and at some party and just wanted some, actually apparently a couple of holes in the wall, must have been a heck of a party, and wanted to cover those holes in the wall with something because I guess the buyer's parents were coming for a visit or something like that. Well, if you know why the buyer wants that, that might help you because a couple of people in making the snowflakes put all sorts of holes and other things like that, and they had the big snowflake just so, oh, you want big, etc. But if you're covering a hole in the wall, you don't want to have holes in your snowflake because the holes in the snowflake are going to show the holes in the wall. So you probably want to have almost a whole thing with it, maybe cut out around the fringes or something, and then the side and inside, maybe color it and draw it or whatever. But you don't necessarily want to have, donut holes in it because the donut holes go show the hole. So again, you want to take a look and see, not just what do you want, but why do you want it. Let's take a look at another thing. Oh, okay, let's go to the fifth of the investigate skills. Helping others to be methodical and organized and to investigate. To help others to be methodical and organized and investigate. You're not going to be the only person on the team that's going to learn things, that's going to do some investigating, do some discovery. Again, watch what you folks did in Snowflake. First round or two, most teams are sending up one, maybe two people. You get down to the fifth or sixth round, they're sending almost everybody up with regard to it. Well, these other people who haven't had your experience, let's say you were the first one, you're now on your fifth round, they're on their first. Do you think they have a learning curve to go through? Probably what you went through. Do you think maybe it's a good idea to help them? Help them to be methodical and organized and, let them know, ask these questions, go to that buyer, say this or whatever like that. I would think so. And then the sixth and the final skill that's mentioned under investigate is a good investigator will create an environment that encourages exploration, encourages questioning, especially with regard to what's going on in the marketplace and with regard to customers. We talked earlier about creating that culture of, let's ask. Some of the teams I saw, at least early on, were teams where most of the people tended to be somewhat shy and introverted. This was something new. They hadn't been to the lunchbox before. They didn't know the buyers. They didn't know what was going on, etc. So, a lot of people took kind of a wait-and-see approach or, less than active approach or whatever. What you want to do, a good skill for someone who's an investigator, is create that environment encouraging other people. Let's explore. Let's go ask questions or whatever. You're going to find out lots of answers, but won't it be nice if something you might not have learned? Your colleague asked a question and said, oh, did you know what? This is what they want. It certainly can help out you and can help out your whole team. Well, that finishes up the third of the four major topics. So far, we've gone over the introduction. We've gone over the profile. We just went over the skills. Well, let's go to the third and the final major point of the chapter, and that's the mindset of an investigator. And your author has a couple of points here to mention, and I'll bring up a couple as well. I have a couple slides, etc. I want to show you. One of the things that your author says under the mindset, which is kind of interesting, I almost think she probably should have said it under the introduction. She said that of all the eyes, all 6 eyes that she has, this eye is the most frequently overlooked. In businesses, in school, or whatever, it's most frequently overlooked. People overlook the eye for investigate. Now, you might say, why? But let's go back to what you folks did in the Snowflake Lab. How many of your teams started cutting snowflakes before you went out and investigated? How many started cutting snowflakes before you had all the answers, or at least a significant number of the answers, etc.? Why? Well, part of that goes to something about our culture that she mentions. And if you think about this, in our culture, activity is rewarded. There's no time to stop and think. Activity is rewarded. We're looking at other tables. My God, they're cutting and running, doing all stuff. We're sitting here and we're thinking, or we're going up and we're asking questions. My God, well, I'm in line asking questions. I'm not cutting snowflakes, and that other table's already got 15 snowflakes made. We don't have any because they're waiting for me. So what you tend to see is what you felt in that snowflake lab, and you see in life. Activity is rewarded. Think about this: you get a job someplace, and you go to work there at the job, and you're sitting there, and you're at your desk, and you're doing something like this, or maybe looking up at the ceiling or whatever, and your boss walks by and sees you. What does your boss see you doing? Nothing. You don't really see somebody thinking. We just see somebody not doing anything. Your boss says, I'm not paying you to sit there and not do anything. By God, start cutting snowflakes. Look, everybody's busy. Do something. So activity is rewarded. Generally speaking, there's no time to stop and think, or at least we don't think there's time to stop and think. So let me give you an example of this, and I think a pretty good idea of something that you should do not only as an investigator, but just as a person and in your career going forward. Let me start off and show you this slide with regard to this thing about activity rewarded, no time to stop and think. Now, this slide, I mean, you see this kid sitting next to a tree or whatever here. This slide has to do with a buzz phrase I'm going to give to you here. And the buzz phrase is called the thinking tree. The thinking tree. One of the things I've done in life, I had a TV show that I hosted and produced. It was on for, I don't know, like 6 years or something. But honestly, I don't think anybody watched it. We just had sponsors and promoters because they like to have their people associated with them on our show as guests or whatever. I'll stay on. As long as you're paying the bills, I'm fine. I'm glad for it. One of the co-hosts I had on the show was the editor of, I think it was called Small Business News Magazine, SBN. And you can imagine, guys, pretty busy. And usually this was back in the day when most magazines were hard copy, they're paper, etc. And you'd have to take them to the printer and print up 5 million of them and mail them out to all your subscribers and send them to some stores to sell them or whatever it might be. So you can imagine that one of the busiest days this fellow had every month was the day before and the day of taking it to the printer. Let's make sure everything's finally pulled together, etc. It's all ready, and we misspelled something there. No, those pages are not in order. Let's do something with this picture. So once you finally get that all done, and that, of course, that takes a tremendous amount of time, you rush it off to the printer and get it, order, how many printed up, etc. So this fellow was on his that day, before going to the printer, and he told his wife, "Hey, listen, I won't be home for dinner tonight. This is one of those days, and I'll be in the office, God knows how long, trying to get the final edition ready to go to print." And his wife says, "Fine, no problem." But about 4 o'clock that afternoon, while he's in his office, he gets a panicked phone call from his wife. She's besides herself. Their little boy, who I think was either in kindergarten or first grade or whatever, probably first grade, hadn't come home from school. And they checked, and he got off the school bus, and the school bus driver said, "Yeah, I dropped them off." And some of the people got off and went, "Oh, yeah, we saw Billy," or whatever his name was, but he never came home. He had a bunch of brothers and sisters at home or whatever. No, we never saw him. So they called a bunch of neighbors, have you seen him? Nope. They looked in the neighborhood, they drove around, couldn't find him. So she's in a panic. She said, "We can't find him." So he hops in a car and he zooms home. I mean, he flies low, right? He's going to drive as fast as he can. His little boy is missing. And when he gets home, the police are already there, and the police are doing some searching or whatever, and they told him and his wife, just sit here by the phone. Maybe your son was kidnapped, and if so, you might get a phone call from the kidnapper wanting some ransom money or whatever. So just stay here." And he said, "Go pound salt. My kid's missing. I'm going to go look for my kid." So by the time he got home, and it was in the wintertime. It was already dusk, not quite dark yet, but getting there. And he owned a fairly large farm south of Pittsburgh. He didn't farm it. It was basically unfarmed farmland and lots of woods on it as well. So he's out and he's searching for the kid. And by the way, the neighbors were out searching, the police and dogs, etc. Nobody could find this kid. So he's out searching, and there's a grove of trees out in the middle of nowhere. And again, it's dark and you can barely see, but there's a little bit of light in the sky and that grayishness. And looks, and he sees a tree that's kind of fallen over. And there's something on the tree, and he can't quite figure it out. And it gets a little closer and closer, and by goodness, it's his son. So he screams out, whatever his kid's name was, Billy, Billy, Billy. And the kid pops up, "Dad," etc., and they run and they hug. And, Dad on one hand, hugging him because he loves him, but on the other hand, wants to smack him silly. "Where the hell have you been? You should have been home, and we're all worried," etc. And the kid's answer to "where you've been, why are you out here," goes to this concept about activities rewarded, and there's no time to stop and think. Here we have this little kid, 7 years old, 6, 7 years old, or something like that. And his answer was, "Well, Dad, life is so tough." Yeah, life's tough for a 6-year-old. Yeah, finding socks that match or something, right? Life is so tough. There are times I just have to get away from it all. I have to get away from everybody. And I have to just go someplace and think. And I come out here in that tree. I just lie on the tree out there and I look at the sky and everything like that. And I think, that's my thinking tree. Well, if you think about it, don't we all need a thinking tree? Before we start cutting snowflakes, shouldn't we be doing some thinking about that? Before we do anything in life, shouldn't we do some thinking? How many of you right now in your life, you're running around nuts? You have, no time in the world to even, eat something. It's a quick meal or something like that, or a snack, if that. And you're running from here and running to there, etc., like that. Wouldn't it be nice if on occasion you actually had a couple of extra minutes, maybe longer? You could just sit and think and try to put out life back together again and make some sense out of it all and make some plans? Well, that's one of the problems with regard to life. We all are going nuts, activities rewarded, and there's no time to stop and think. Maybe what we need is we all need a thinking tree. In addition to that, still under this mindset, the author mentions a couple of other points I want to raise. And the first of these goes to another of these slides that I have for you. So let me pop up the slide and then let's talk about that. This slide is related to the next part of the mindset that she mentions, the author mentions with regard to investigators. With regard to the mindset, an investigator should be someone who wants to gather ideas and run them by, find out what are the thoughts of my customers. What do my customers want? Again, you made a whole bunch of snowflakes early on that nobody wanted, right? That was no good. So you want to make snowflakes that people wanted. So you want to find out what your customers want. Now, one way to do that, a very good way to do that, I actually have one of my other classes, a new venture creation class, Management 425. The students, one of the labs that they do there is that they create a business, their team creates a business. And as they're trying to figure out what type of product to do and how much to charge for it and what it should look like and all this other stuff, they go out and they do customer surveys. Customer surveys as part of the assignment. So one way to find out what your customers' thoughts on this is, well, ask them and maybe do surveys of all your customers, etc. Related to that, there's a slide, and if you think about it, it's a kind of an odd slide. It has a radio and the radio station or whatever. Well, this goes to something you want to keep in mind. Virtually everybody that you are trying to sell to, all those buyers of snowflakes and in your life, you're trying to get a job, you're trying to sell yourself. The recruiters that you have, you're trying to sell your products, etc. after you're in a job or whatever. Virtually everyone you're talking to, you should keep in mind is actually listening to a radio station. I know you say that's crazy. Everybody's listening to the same radio station. No one listens to radio anymore, etc. Yeah, they do. In this radio station that everybody listens to is called WIIFM. WIIFM. And that stands for What's in it for me? What's in it for me? When you're making a pitch to try to get investors for a new business you have, to try to get a job for you, to try to sell some product or whatever, when you're making a pitch, you should keep in mind that as you're talking, they have earbuds in or whatever, and your customers, while you're talking and listening to you, they're also listening to this radio station. What's in it for me? They want to hear from you. How is this going to benefit me? Now keep in mind, we're not talking about features. There's a difference between features and benefits. For example, you could go out and you could look at a car. Let's say, for example, a couple years ago, my wife wanted to buy a Jeep. And one of the reasons she wanted the Jeep is she liked four-wheel drive. All-wheel drive is great, but she wanted four-wheel drive. So if you think about it, a feature of this Jeep she was looking at was four-wheel drive. But what's the benefit of four-wheel drive? Is it the same thing? No, there's four-wheel drive is the feature. What's the benefit? Well, the benefit, of course, is, we live in an area where it snows, and four-wheel drive will keep you from getting stuck in the snow. And if you do any off-roading or whatever, maybe you're a hunter or something like that, four-wheel drive will help you as you're on rough roads and uneven roads and mud and other things like that. That's the benefit. So think about this. Everybody you're trying to sell something to, everybody is listening to that radio station, WIIFM. If you want to get their attention, you're going to sing a song of what's in it for you. Here are the benefits. You're going to sing them a song of benefits, not necessarily the song of features. And you think, I told them the feature. They should automatically know what the benefit is. No, they won't. Let's face it. All of us are so busy today. It is amazing. We are all so busy. We don't have time to, what did we say a little bit ago? We don't have time to think. So you might say, I told you the feature. You should know the benefit. If you're a good salesperson, don't rely on they should know the benefit. Tell them the benefit. They want to hear through WIIFM, they want to hear the benefit. So don't just tell them features, tell them the benefit. This then leads to the next slide that I have for you, which is also related to this concept of mindset. So let me show up this next slide and let's talk about that too. If you think about it, this is kind of an interesting slide, right? It's got some picture of a little girl who's a chatterbox, and it's got some dog with big ears, a little mouth, but big ears, etc. on that. What's that got to do with mindset? Well, I think this is related to a story that I was told once by one of my students years ago when I was teaching a class at the University of Pittsburgh. It was a communications class. And one of my students was raising her hand, a comment about something that we were talking about. And she said something that relates to this concept of mindset. About you got to tell them the benefits. You recognize I got to tell them the benefits. My mindset is I got to tell you the benefits. I have to ask you what benefits are you seeking, etc. So then I can go and get it, etc. This girl mentioned that as she was growing up, as she was a young girl, she said, as a little kid, she said, I was a chatterbox, always talking. And she said, both my mom and my dad worked, so I spent most of my time, at least during the day, being raised by my grandmother. And I'm not sure if it was her paternal or maternal grandmother, but her grandmother. And she said one day as she was yakking away or something, her grandmother, who she said was a very good lady, stern and strict and powerful lady, but very good-hearted lady, said something to her which is related to the slide, was related to this mindset. Her grandmother said, young lady, you were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. You should listen twice as much as you speak. A good investigator is going to recognize, I can speak all day long. I'm not going to learn anything about my customers. How am I going to learn about my customers? How am I going to be a good investigator? I'm going to remember, I have 1 mouth, but I have 2 ears. I should listen twice as much as I speak. If you want to figure out what's in it for me, what benefits are my customers looking for, what do my customers want, etc., so that you can make something that will benefit them, what you want to do is you want to recognize, don't talk as much as you listen, because listening is one way to discover things. Listening is a very good way to investigate that you have. So hopefully this kind of finishes up here with regard to this concept of investigate. But your author kind of concludes with an interesting comment. And I'll ask you this question. She says, do you notice any difference between this eye, the eye for investigate, and the other eyes that we've already talked about? Just conceptually, from a general standpoint, is there a difference? There is. This is the first eye that we're talking about that no longer focuses just on the idea or the creator of the idea. This eye focuses on outsiders. This eye focuses on customers and your market. So whereas before we're looking at you internally, what do I think, what am I creating, and all these other things, what's the idea I have? Now what we're doing is, as opposed to looking inside, we're looking outside, we're looking at customers, and we're looking at markets. Well, hopefully you enjoyed today's lecture on this concept of investigate, whether we're talking about thinking trees or radio stations or ears and mouths and things like that. If you have any questions, please let me know. Keep in mind, again, in the Snowflake Lab, one of the biggest problems you had is this eye. Keep in mind what the author says, this eye is the one that's least frequently used and recognized. And keep in mind how important it was once you used this eye and got information, how that helped you to produce a product that got you closer to, if not to, success. So this eye is really important. And it's not just important for the 6-eye model, it's important for you as well. Discover. Use this concept of investigate. Investigate's a really important eye. With that said and done, I'm done for the day. I hope, as I say, I hope you enjoyed the lecture. I hope you enjoy what's going on in class. If you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to let me know. I'll be glad to help you out. And with that said and done, I hope you have a good evening, good afternoon coming up, and I'll see you next time. Bye.